Welcome to KetoMealsAndRecipes.com. Starting with this recipe I'm posting today, I'm going to be featuring quite a few recipes that we enjoyed or that were inspired by places we visited and stayed at while traveling in Europe about 3 years ago. It took me quite a while to convert these recipes to keto because I wanted to maintain a really authentic taste, not just a namesake recipe. So I hope you will enjoy the recipes that I'll be presenting. And today I'm going to start with this French recipe. It's really amazing and it features one of my favorite seasoning, Herbes de Provence. This recipe is very typical of the sorts of flavors that we enjoyed while we were in southern France. And since many of you have requested that I provide meal ideas and macros for the complete meal, I will do so at the end of this video. So please watch to the end. So now to get started making this very tasty and impressive looking entree, steak Provencal. The macronutrient ratio for this recipe is 2.4 to 1 with 2.9 grams of total carbs, 0.6 grams of dietary fiber, resulting in only 2.3 grams of net carbs per generous serving. The first step is to prepare the steak marinade. Into a mixing bowl, add your creamy Dijon mustard, and next you add the olive oil, then the dry red wine, or if you don't want to use red wine, you can substitute with red wine vinegar. Then add the grated garlic and the salt and pepper. Stir really well, and when everything is nicely combined, remove 1 tablespoon of this mustard mixture and set it aside for later. Next, add most of the chopped cilantro. Reserve about 1 tablespoon and set that aside for later as well. And the last thing you do is you add all of the Herbes de Provence seasoning and then stir very well. This is all there is to making this very flavorful French style marinade. Now just apply the marinade all over the steak. Be very generous and use all of it. If you're planning to do this right away, you have to let it marinate for about 30 minutes in order for the flavors to infuse the meat. Or if you're doing this as a prep ahead, place the marinated steak on a platter, cover it with cling wrap and refrigerate overnight or even up to 24 hours if you have time. And then when you're ready to grill the steak, for best results, take the steak out of the refrigerator and let the meat come to room temperature before you start grilling. It's important that the meat is at room temperature. This will ensure more even internal cooking, which will give you better control over the degree of doneness and how well done or raw you wish the center to be. When it's time to make your steak, preheat your well-oiled grill pan over medium-high heat if you're doing this on the stovetop, or preheat and grease your grill before using your barbecue. Then place the steak on the grill and sear each side for about 2 to 5 minutes. Your actual time will depend on how thick your steak is, so you'll have to be the judge of this. This process of searing seals the juices in the meat and browns the outside and makes it nice and crispy. After you've seared both sides, reduce the heat to medium and grill by flipping the steak every couple minutes or so until the steak is done to your liking. Flipping it back and forth keeps the temperature on both the top and the bottom nice and even, and the steak will be much nicer when it's finished. When done, place the steak on a cutting board and let it rest for about 10 minutes before you begin to cut it. Now, while the steak is resting, it's time to prepare the seasoned tomatoes, which will go on top. Into a small mixing bowl, add the cut cherry tomatoes. Then add the capers, your reserved chopped cilantro, and also the tablespoon of the mustard mixture you set aside from step 1. Then toss everything gently to coat all the tomato pieces. When your steak has rested, cut the steaks into 1/2 inch or slightly more than 1 centimeter widths. As you can see, the steak is still quite hot, so it's a good idea to use tongs to hold the steak in place as you're cutting it. After you've cut the steak, use a spatula or long knife to help you lift the steak and put it onto a serving platter. Then distribute your seasoned tomatoes on top. And this is how easy it is to make this recipe. Now I'll show you how to make it into a meal. There are several vegetables that go really well with this meal, One of the easiest side dishes that go really well with these flavors is my easy Keto Grilled Zucchini Spears. A link for this recipe will be provided in the description below. And here's the macro information for the steak, Provencal, and grilled zucchini spears. Now these are really good ratios, and here you have a really filling, delicious, and nutritious meal. I hope you enjoy it. And please come back and check out my next recipe, which will be a classic cake from Spain. The link for the printable steak Provencal recipe will be provided in the description below.